Welcome to Musical Minds and Missions, M Cubed. I'm your host, Sarah Cahill. M Cubed is brought to you by Phenotypic Recordings, a media company that brings to light new music by world-class musicians and innovative composers with a focus on music that highlights the most important issues facing the world in our time. Today, I'm talking with cellist Paul Wiancko about his curation at the Spoleto Festival USA. Paul Wiancko, it's wonderful to talk with you, and welcome to the Phenotypic Podcast.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Great to be here.
You are an incredible composer, cellist, and now also the producer of this set of recordings, which is just out on the Phenotypic label, of live concert recordings from the Spoleto Festival. Let's talk about this first and how you made the choices for this set of recordings.
Well, the recordings are very much a reflection of the spirit of the chamber music series at Spoleto Festival USA in Charleston, South Carolina. And that spirit is a sort of reflection of the community down there, my own sort of hopes and dreams as a curator, and sort of my own philosophy just as a music lover. So it's kind of a bit of everything. And then that goes for the festival and the Phenotypic album. It's sort of a representation of kind of all of the music, the chamber music that I love, that I think speaks to each other across the ages and across continents and even genres to an extent. So it's all just really, really good music. You know, I've spent my life sort of accumulating musical experiences and musical tastes, from, you know, the very avant-garde to extremely traditional, well-worn classical works. And I really believe that to live a truly fulfilled musical life, you should be on the hunt to expand the repertoire and the music that you love so that you can just enjoy more of it. And so that's kind of my secret goal with the Spoleto Chamber Series, is to bring a really wide array of music, from Renaissance and even Gregorian ancient music to, you know, world premieres and the cool new electronic based things, and then everything in between, from a Brahms whatever piano quartet, a Haydn quartet. And I think music speaks to each other, and composers sort of speak to each other over centuries, and it's a really beautiful thing. So that's what inspires the chamber music series, and this collection of recordings is a sort of distillation of that. There's a little bit of a focus on the newer works that were programmed on the festival, because there are just fewer recordings of those works out in the wild, and this music deserves to be heard, and all of the repertoire was recorded so beautifully. But there are definitely some older works thrown in the mix, which I think do something to highlight different aspects of the newer repertoire. So it's all about the conversation between new and old, and hopefully that just kind of pleases people's ears and kind of opens people's hearts to new things, and helps us all enjoy the old things a little bit more too.
Absolutely. It's an amazing range of composers and music, and you have Clara Schumann, Rina Ismail, Lou Harrison's Very Trio, which is such a great piece, Henry Purcell, Isabella Leonardo, who is a great Baroque composer, Gabriella Smith, William Grant Still, Selena Fisher. And I think for many years we heard composers like Isabella Leonardo and Clara Schumann only in recordings which were good and decent, but not fabulous. And we still don't hear those composers enough. And I think it takes a curiosity and a vision to integrate them into this kind of chamber series and have really terrific performances, so that audiences then say, yes, these are worthy of the dedication by these great musicians and worthy of being at the Spoleto Festival USA, which is a big deal. And I think it's so wonderful that you have 6 centuries worth of this great music. Yeah.
It's really like I feel like a kid in a candy shop. People ask me how I decide what music to program, and there are an unlimited amount of factors, and an unlimited amount of choices, especially when you love music as much as I do, even maybe music that other people don't love so much, maybe even music that's not so great. My heart tends to want to stay open to things and give composers, performers the benefit of the doubt. I'm trying to extend that to myself as a composer when I listen to my own work and when I'm working on things to extend that sort of generosity of listening. But it's really just an absolute pleasure to be able to put these programs together because there's just an unlimited amount of greatness there waiting to be plucked and introduced to audiences. So something like the Leader by Clara Schumann, it never really occurred to me so much that, oh, these pieces haven't been performed or recorded as much as, say, Robert Schumann's Leader, but just something about the music drew me in, and seemed like there was a very powerful connection to me in the work of Clara Schumann and Rina Esmail and what they're both trying to accomplish. And for that sort of to be brought together by a vocal performance by Sarah, our fantastic soprano, just somehow makes those works speak to each other even more in a way that just kind of tickles.
We are going to listen to a little bit of Henry Purcell. Who is Henry Purcell speaking to in this compilation?
I have a very, very soft spot for Purcell. As someone who enjoys tonality and virtuosity and really thoughtful compositions, as well as someone who likes to be kind of thrown off the scent occasionally by a piece. And Purcell does it to me every single time. He lulls the listener into the sense of sort of comfort. Oh, I know where this is going. I understand harmony enough, basso continuo enough to be, oh, this is a pleasant tune. And then all of a sudden, what is going on? There's just this tweak in the harmonic structure or just some chord or that's just so unbelievably beautiful and sounds like almost like the piece was written yesterday by some youngster who decided to, push the limit of the style of writing. Every single time I listen to Purcell, there's something in there that just grabs me. And it's just this juicy harmony or something that seems just so much more innovative than his peers, perhaps. And this piece in particular, the three parts upon a ground, it happens pretty quickly in the piece. There's this crazy chord that could be, if you were to kind of analyze the chord itself, it would be very, very dissonant and kind of this 21st century sort of harmonic vibe. And it's just so beautiful. And I felt kind of represents in a weird, nerdy, musical, harmonic way what I'm going for with the Spoleto series is to reframe traditional music in a way where we realize that, everything was new at some point. And if we can train our ears to think like that, it just leads to a more fulfilling, relationship with music. So that's what three parts on a ground. That's why it sort of kicks off the phenotypic recording. It also kicked off the 2024 Spoleto Festival, and that was my first year as the chamber music director. So it was the first piece to be performed sort of under my curation. It's a special piece. It holds a special place in my heart.
Who are the performers here?
The performance of this features three virtuosic solo violin parts. It's Owen Dalby, Alexi Kenny, and Livia Sohn. And it's sort of a mini triple concerto. And then the basso continuo is myself on cello and Peja Mucievich on harpsichord.
That was music by Henry Purcell from the new Phenotypic album of a compilation from the Spoleto Festival USA. And it's wonderful to be talking with you, Paul Wiancko. Hey, oh, your vision for this chamber music festival and for this compilation is so wide ranging. And I want to go back to your work as a cellist. First of all, you started playing cello and then you started composing at age 8. And were they always equal while you were growing up? Were they sort of equal activities?
I have to clarify. I composed a very, very, very simple melody on the piano when I was 8, and then I didn't compose in earnest again until I think maybe I was 29 or something like that. So composition entered my life in a real way when I was 29, 28, 29. Until that point, I had a pretty varied musical life, but cello centric. So improvising, electronic music.
You played with Chick Corea and with Etta James at the Hollywood Bowl, and you had a
Yeah, I had some fantastic, fantastic experiences, and things sort of funneled my vision more and more towards composition, I think, the more I experienced. And Chick Corea was kind of the very last stage of that process, just working with him and going on tour with him. It's kind of sitting right next to him night after night, watching him basically compose these incredible works on the fly. I mean, he would call them improvisations or solos, but to me, they were just so beautifully thought out and so natural. And, if someone transcribed any of them, they would be brilliant works. And he encouraged me and my quartet at the time, the Harlem Quartet, to take more and more risks while we were on stage with him, while we were playing. And he encouraged us to take more brave solos. And he particularly pushed me, and we were discussing after one show kind of the feeling of playing these solos and the terror that I felt, of trying to, play jazz on cello and play it well. And he basically told me, I think you're playing what you think you should play rather than what you want to play. And that kind of opened a whole realm of thinking and of music making for me that was more, based on embracing my own character and my own intentions as a musician rather than trying to copy someone else's style or to try to fit into a pre-existing situation. And that kind of bled over to how I thought of my career at the time. And I said, I think I'm going to go for it. I'm going to start composing. So I left the quartet and began this brand new journey that was definitely, heavily inspired by Chick Corea. My music still, I think, is influenced by Chick Corea in a very deep way. His sense of harmony and rhythm just so deeply moved me. Anyhow, so
But what an incredible formative experience, and something that, I mean, years and years of conservatory training can never get you that kind of, what you learned from Chick Corea. So that's
right,
really amazing. Amazing.
and that by that time I had already been out of school for 10 years or so, and it just I was still searching. So if there are any young people listening to this that are searching, or not so young people that are searching, it's a lifelong search, I think, to figure out where you're most useful and where you feel the best sort of within the musical ecosystem, and in what method best serves what you want to say and the impact you want to have on your community. And for me, composition feels like the deepest, most true version of my artistic self. And I didn't figure that out until I was 29.
No, I teach a class at the San Francisco Conservatory, which is about to start in a few weeks, contemporary keyboard literature and 20th century keyboard literature. In talking with other teachers who do similar things, do similar kinds of classes, I wonder about classical musicians who are resistant to new music and to sort of going outside the classical canon because of, we all get taught there's great music. There's the Beethoven sonatas and the Beethoven string quartets and Bach and Mozart and so on. So there's this great classical canon. And then there's a lot of music outside of that, like Isabella Leonardo, Rina Ismail, dating back to the 13th century. I mean, there have always been composers who were marginalized ever since the beginning of music. So I wonder, I mean, you must get asked this all the time, but I mean, you encounter a range of musicians at the Spoleto Festival and in all the work you do as a mentor, as a guide, as a teacher, as a cellist and composer. And you must encounter, very adventurous young musicians, but also musicians who need to be guided into playing new music and sort of who haven't had your Chick Corea experience. Is that right?
Absolutely. The more I experience, the more different perspectives um I encounter and sort of absorb, the richer my life gets, and the more I sort of feel like I have a grasp on humanity, basically. So to have, very, very close friends who are deeply steeped in traditional classical music, romantic music, or, someone might be a concerto soloist, so they live, breathe, and die, Sibelius and Brahms and Beethoven and Mozart, and to witness the devotion there is so powerful, and the same with artists who are focused on newer music and composers who have devoted their life to music, who are, around today and working every day to create the best possible music that they can, and to be friends with those people as well, and to see that devotion. It's the same, it's the same devotion. It's the same sort of breed of this sort of pathological, insane need to put the hours in, chasing this particular goal to make this Beethoven violin concerto the best it could possibly be, to make this brand new string quartet that's being composed something the world has never heard before, that people are going to love, and it's going to, change the landscape of music in 2025. The thing that drives both of those two people are the same. It's the same. It comes from the same deep, indescribable place within us, and that's the most beautiful thing. I'm just choosing the two most obvious examples of this, but this expands. There are unlimited, situations where this applies in different genres, that people who improvise, or folk musicians, or whatever your tradition or culture that you are kind of working within, to create something, things that where the ending product of what you're working on is totally different from each other. When we receive that product and enjoy it as a listener, we tend to, compartmentalize everything into genres, age, century, culture, country, new, old, tonal, atonal. It's just what our brain does, and it's kind of society encourages that, I think, to just make sure we categorize things, maybe so that we know how to find them later. But there's a sense that's sort of like something slightly unhealthy about going too far in that direction, I think. And there's something that's just so beautiful when you realize that everything is connected, and that all of music is a sort of outcropping and a sort of an indicator of where humanity is headed, what humanity is up to right now, the things we like, the things we're talking about, the things wonderful and horrible happening in the world today. Art is a reflection of all of those things. That's kind of what stems, whether you're Beethoven holed up in Vienna working on your quartet as Vienna is being bombed by Napoleon, or whether you're, an artist present day reading the headlines and trying to figure out your place in this insane world and how you might apply your art and your craft and your music in some way that might address what's happening in the world. And that's just what art does. So the new music versus old music, it's a very convenient way to frame a conversation. And it's a conversation that needs to be had, and I think will always be had, because there will always be new music and there will always be Beethoven, and Beethoven will always be great, and there will always be something great being created as we're having this conversation right now. So that will it's an evergreen sort of way of talking about these concepts, I think. And in a way, the curation at Spoleto is a way of having that conversation through music, through curation, through listening. And I introduce every piece to the audience there. And it's not really like, well, you're about to hear a piece by Gabriella Smith written in 2015, and then we're gonna, go back to we're going to listen to some Haydn, and I want you to think about both of those things. It's nothing like that. It's just there's an emotional resonance that, these pieces might have, that I want people to feel without thinking so much about it. It's a very emotionally conceived program, and that's reflected in the phenotypic albums as well. There's nothing, I don't want to shove the idea of new versus old down anyone's throat, but things are framed in a way where I hope if you listen to things back to back to back, that it'll just, create a sense that everything is connected in this beautiful, beautiful way, and that we are all part of history, and it's a living history, and it's an evolving history.
I also imagine, what you say is so important. And in your work as cellist with the Kronos Quartet, I think it must be fascinating to premiere pieces and then watch them over time and have them kind of resonate through the years. And like, the idea that Terry Riley wrote his string quartets for the Kronos Quartet, and now it's, decades and decades later, and those pieces are taken up by other string quartets, and that then that these new pieces of music then taken up by younger generations and successive generations, just like you were saying about Henry Purcell, that Purcell was new music once. So it's
Exactly. There's a continuity there that has always been there. The whole idea of devoting your life to writing music, in my opinion, is insanity. And, as someone who composes as well, it's a really strange way to use your time, to spend all this time alone, imagining what something might sound like if other people were to play it. It's a really strange career, I must say, but it's beautiful to hand the artist a piece of music with the idea that they will be the first to play it, and then after that, the music, it takes on a life of its own, and that life, especially now with music living on the internet, I think in the olden days you had to be sort of afraid if, music library were to burn down, or if your own, database of your own works were to somehow perish, your music would be lost to history. But now, if whatever we create now, theoretically could live forever. So a string quartet written in 2025 could be around for 1,000 years or more, and could go through, theoretically, hopefully, the hands of hundreds of different artists from all over the world. And it's such a mind-blowing thing to sort of be thinking about your relationship with time and people on that scale. It's easy to forget. It's hard to actually fathom. So, but when you really think about it, it's such a enormously beautiful, moving thing to be a part of. And that I keep coming back to the Spoleto curation, because it's just so much fun to try to convey the scale and the beauty of that without actually explaining to people, this is what makes music beautiful and this is, how you should enjoy it. But it's just the overall sort of effect that I hope kind of illustrates that relationship between composers, musicians, listeners, history, and time.
We're going to listen to Rina Ismail next, a fascinating composer. Tell us about this piece that's on the album, on the Phenotypic.
Well, we were lucky enough to have Rina Ismail as composer in residence during the 2024 season. So this piece called This Is It is Rina's, the world premiere, the piece that she wrote for us. It's in 8 short movements, and each movement sort of juxtaposes some concept like light and dark, push and pull, that kind of thing. But Rina is just, in my mind, one of the most important and natural and kind of wonderfully thoughtful composers around today. And the way she incorporates her own heritage into her music and her own identity, it's just it's a powerful thing for other composers and other artists to witness and to hopefully, encourage us all to think about who we are, how we can integrate, the most honest parts of ourselves into our music making and even into the way we listen to music. So it was wonderful to have Rina at the festival to discuss that. And I'm so thrilled about this piece that she wrote for us called This Is It.
That's music by Rina Ismail, and I love that she has such a tremendous body of work and that, pianists can play her music, orchestras can play her music, that there's so many wonderful pieces by her that are readily available and just beautiful. And again, will be taken up by successive generations of
Absolutely.
musicians.
And she's this sort of rare person who is very gifted, not only as a musician, but as a speaker and an educator. And, She's just an incredibly thoughtful, well-spoken human being. So to combine that with someone who's also a brilliant composer, it's just kind of, you get a sort of superhuman of the music world. So she's such a fantastic example, a kind of leader, I think, in the world of music today.
Are the issues of putting together a compilation of these recordings, which are live concert recordings, and audience noises? And I mean, I have a radio show and I always love playing, you know, live concert recordings. By last week, it was like Sviatoslav Richter and Benjamin Britten at, playing Schubert together, or, just these, it's, you get the electricity of the concert hall, but also there are issues when you're trying to put it together as a producer.
Right. And, I kind of enjoy those issues. I've never been so bothered by, to hear a cough during a performance or, people rustling around or shifting in their seats. All those things kind of, there's like an electricity in the room for a live performance. And part of that is the noise that a human body will physically make when it's, kind of sitting in a chair for 2 hours. And there's something in these recordings that capture that in this amazing way. I think I know it sounds cliche to say that a recording is raw, but there's like, I don't know. I haven't listened to a lot of live classical recordings recently, or that many live recordings. I'm sort of inundated with studio recordings these days, and there's just all of these, incredible new releases to keep track of. And I associate live recordings, whether it's, a live classical series, or like a Montreux Jazz Festival live recordings from decades ago. There's just this awesome energy or like, Jimi Hendrix at Woodstock, or like there's something that happens in those situations that no one could ever replicate in a recording studio. And I've tried. I've recorded albums where those of us in the studio just kind of say, forget it. Let's go for the live. Let's give full energy. Let's pretend like we're playing for people in the room. Let's take risks. And, those have been some of the funnest recordings I've been a part of. And there's something unpredictable that happens that leads to a kind of imperfect product. So I remember in that situation, we went back again and said, okay, that was fun, but let's now try to make it perfect. Okay. All right. So we resigned to the fact that, you can't recreate a live recording in, an isolation room. You need that energy of the crowd there. So these recordings, there's something, they're almost perfect. I gotta say, the level of playing and virtuosity is kind of off the charts. But there is that rawness, that sort of fun, unpredictable energy. And you can hear it in the room. You could hear it in the playing. There's just a directness of the playing, right? Like perfection is not necessarily priority number one when you're playing for someone face to face. I think sort of the priority becomes, getting the idea across, getting the emotion across, making sure that the music's intention, the composer's intention is clear, and that you're providing someone with an experience in real time that will move them. And that, when you're listening to a recording on headphones, part of that is perfection and balance and post-production and things. But in a place like the Dock Street Theater in Charleston, it's about the connection between the artists and the listener. So I think this record kind of captures that in this wonderful way. There's the way the series works. It's 33 different performances in the course of about 2.5 weeks. So we would play 2 shows, one at 11, one at 1, and then straight back into the rehearsal room to rehearse for the next day's program. So things just come and go very, very quickly, repertoire-wise. So for the artists to kind of achieve the level of polish that is on these recordings, it blows my mind. And part of that is only achievable because the artists that come to Spoleto bring with them their own sort of universe of music and repertoire. And I will, ask everyone, all the artists who come for their input of things that they might want to perform, things that they think would be great for the festival, or, things that they just care about immensely, which is really crucial part of my own curatorial philosophy as well, is when you're inviting a person, you're also inviting a lifetime of experience and passion and hard work that, it might be wasted if you ask this one person to, play Bach, or this other person to help us premiere this new piece. It somehow, you have to align the performer with the piece and with the composer to get that, take full advantage of the talent that comes to the festival. So that's an important part of these albums as well. It's not just my vision and my ideas for composers and music. It's all of the artists. It's more of a sort of collective in terms of how the music was chosen.
Do you have planned for next?
Next season is still in the works. Not even all of the artists have been invited yet, but working on it. And it's going to be the 50th Spoleto Festival next year. So it's going to be a big one, a lot of celebratory music. I think there will be a lot of sort of revolutionary music that has a message, has a purpose, music that makes us think, music that makes us feel joy. That's my goal at the moment anyway.
Thank you so much for talking today.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you for listening to M Cubed from Phenotypic Recordings, co-founded by Michael Hostetler and Stephen Pretzman. The music you heard on today's show is available on Bandcamp and wherever music is streamed. There are links in the show notes. Today's program was produced by AJ Machado, and I'm your host, Sarah Cahill. Please follow or subscribe so you know whenever we post a new show. You can reach us at info@phenotypicrecordings.com, and we're always glad to hear from you.